April 21st. A quiet announcement from the Vatican broke the stillness. Pope Francis has died. No flashing headlines, no massive fanfare, just a short statement, and yet it echoed across the world like a bell, tolling not just the end of a papacy, but the end of an era. The man who had walked with the poor, who spoke softly but acted boldly, the man who reminded the Church again and again that mercy isn't just an option, but the very heart of the gospel, was gone. But before the world rushes to look ahead, before debates over his legacy begin or the next conclave stirs curiosity, we have to pause. Not to judge, not to analyse, but to remember. Because understanding Pope Francis isn't about politics or controversy. It's about asking one very honest question. What kind of church did he dream of? And maybe even more important, are we willing to carry that dream forward? Let's take a walk through the life of the man who shook the Catholic Church, not with his fists, but with his heart. Number 1. A boy from Buenos Aires. He was born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the son of Italian immigrants trying to make a life in Argentina. The streets of Buenos Aires were his home, not the glittering touristy parts, but the simple alleys where kids played soccer with old shoes and scraped knees. Jorge wasn't the loud kid. He was the one watching, quiet, thoughtful, sensitive. He studied chemistry. He loved literature. He danced the tango. He even fell in love once. Yes, Pope Francis had a sweetheart as a young man, but then, at 21, everything changed. He got sick, really sick. Part of his lung had to be removed, and from that moment on he breathed differently, not just with his lungs, but with his soul. In that silence, something stirred. A question, a whisper, a calling, and he listened. Number 2, the Jesuit who walked into the mess. When Jorge joined the Jesuits, it wasn't for comfort or prestige. It was because the Jesuits had a mission that stirred his soul. Go where others won't, into the margins, into the mess, into the places where Christ still wears his wounds. He worked in the slums with the poorest of the poor. He didn't preach from pulpits. He walked the muddy streets, sat in broken homes and listened. But he wasn't perfect. As a young priest, he could be stern. Some even called him harsh. He made mistakes, big ones. He carried regrets. But here's the thing. Pope Francis once said, God never tires of forgiving us. We are the ones who tire of seeking his mercy. Over time, God softened him, not to weaken him, but to break him open like bread, to teach him the true cost of compassion. Number 3, pray for me. When the white smoke rose in 2013 and the name Bergoglio was announced, the world paused. Who? He stepped out on the balcony, not with grandeur, not with a golden robe, but with a bowed head, and he spoke just 5 words. Pray for me. Those words weren't staged. They weren't political. They were the prayer of a man who knew that leading the church didn't make him a king. It made him a servant. Number 4. The Pope who smelled like his sheep. From the very beginning, Pope Francis made choices that honestly stunned the world. He kept his old iron cross. He wore plain black shoes. He refused the red velvet cape of tradition. And instead of moving into the majestic apostolic palace, he chose a modest room in Casa Santa Marta, a guest house where he could eat and pray among others. When asked why, he said simply, a shepherd should smell like his sheep. How can you smell like your sheep if you're behind marble walls and layers of protocol? He ditched limousines for a tiny blue Ford Focus. He made spontaneous phone calls to strangers who wrote him letters. He smiled instead of posturing. He washed the feet of Muslims, prisoners and women, not as a performance, but as a prayer. Number 5. Mercy wasn't his strategy, it was his identity. For Pope Francis, mercy wasn't a theme. It was the lens through which he saw everything. He didn't change church doctrine, but he changed its tone. He didn't say, everything is fine. He said, let me walk with you, even if everything's not. He talked about accompaniment, not condemnation. He embraced questions, not just answers. He welcomed those on the fringes and said 5 unforgettable words, who am I to judge? He wasn't rewriting doctrine, he was rehumanizing it. And yes, that made some people very, very uncomfortable. Number 6. A church that listens, not just teaches. He opened doors, carefully, sometimes controversially. He welcomed discussion on married priests in isolated regions. He invited women into leadership roles at the Vatican, not ordination, but voices in rooms where they'd long been silent. He encouraged listening, not just speaking. He restricted the traditional Latin Mass, not to erase the past, but to protect unity in the present. He once said, "It is not progressive to pretend that mercy means permission, and it is not faithful to confuse tradition with fear." Number 7. The backlash and his quiet response. Not everyone rejoiced. Some people, powerful people, called his papacy a disaster. A few cardinals even wrote secret memos calling his leadership a catastrophe. Others were bolder, challenging him publicly, issuing formal doubts, accusing him of betraying tradition. But Francis never responded with anger, never retaliated. He simply said, "I don't feel like judging them. I pray for them and for myself." Still, he quietly made changes. He removed bishops who divided rather than united. He revoked privileges when necessary, but he never gloated. This wasn't a battle between left and right for him. It was a broken family, and he was the father trying to hold the pieces. Number 8. Facing the Church's deepest wounds. When the abuse crisis resurfaced, when survivors came forward, Francis didn't turn away. At first he made mistakes. In Chile he defended a bishop too quickly. People were hurt. But then he apologized. He listened. He acted. He called bishops from around the world to Rome. He lifted the veil of secrecy that had protected predators. He created new rules, stronger, clearer. He defrocked powerful clerics, including a former cardinal. It wasn't enough. Nothing would be. But he tried. And he kept trying, not to fix everything, but to take one painful step toward the truth. Number 9. A voice to the forgotten. Francis saw the Church not as a fortress, but a field hospital. He travelled a lot, to Iraq, to Mongolia, to refugee camps, to prisons, to places no pope had ever gone. He held hands with Muslims. He kissed babies in war zones. He hugged children who had lost everything. He begged the world to notice climate change, not as a politician, but as a father worried for his kids' future. He said, "We have grown used to the suffering of others. It doesn't move us." So he made it his business to care. Number 10. His legacy wasn't a monument, it was a mirror. In the end, Pope Francis didn't set out to leave a legacy. He didn't build cathedrals. He didn't seek applause. What he left behind was far more powerful. A church that dared to listen again. It was never his dream alone. It was the dream of the gospel, the dream of Jesus. And now, that dream belongs to us. In his final breath, Pope Francis didn't point to himself. He whispered, "I am only a servant. The shepherd is still with you." So now it's our turn, to keep walking, to keep listening, to keep smelling like the sheep. Don't be afraid of wounds, don't be afraid of questions, don't be afraid of loving a church that's still learning how to love like Christ. If this touched your heart, leave a prayer for Pope Francis in the comments below. And if you want to keep walking this journey, step by step with him, subscribe to our channel. We'll continue to share his messages, his heart, and his unshakable vision of a church that loves boldly and serves humbly. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and let us know in the comments what part of Pope Francis's life inspired you the most. Because even though the Pope is gone, his dream is still very much alive, and it's in our hands now.